all of the Zoom sounds go through here and.
Okay,
Yeah,
now
the
we're good.
camera
Now
is
we're
the
good.
one.
Thank you there.
Yeah.
Yep, we got it. Okay, Kelly, do you hear me? No, yes, now you hear. Okay, now you try.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we do. Excellent. Thank you very much.
So the Zoom presenter needs to share the
Yep.
screen.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Okay.
Nice.
Thank you, Pablo.
David, I'm going to be outside here because I'm in charge of this room.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if anything, just put your head out and.
Thank you, Pablo. Okay. Excellent, Kelly. You can try sharing your screen now. Fantastic. And we'll try getting you pinned here, spotlight for everyone, turned down to a single. And okay, we see you. We see your presentation. One more check,
Great.
we can hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
I could hear you, but not through Zoom. One more time.
Can you hear me okay?
We can certainly hear you in the room, but I'm not sure. What I'll do is I'm on Zoom. I'll move. Just hang on a second.
The Zoom presenter, the doesn't stop sharing. So you need to make sure that they do so when they're done. All right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, you could watch it and they will start chatting and say, well.
Okay, Kelly, I just had to move out of the room.
Oh, okay.
All right, that's okay. I can hear you now clearly on Zoom. All right, I'm going to leave over to the session chair then.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And Kelly, just a question. You can hear me, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Marcel will be presenting too, right?
I'm just presenting and my colleague Kara will be around for any questions as well.
Okay, good. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries.
Very thanks.
Yeah, I guess we just give people a few more minutes. We had this business lunch, Kelly, and I think people miss a break a bit.
No problem.
So it seems to get quiet outside the room. So let's start. Welcome to this session on partnerships and collaboration. My name is Anne-Sophie Fink, and I'm from DAIC, Danish E-Infrastructure Consortium, which is actually a very small organization, although it sounds like something big. We'll have 4 presentations, 2 virtually and 2 here in the room. That gives us about 20 minutes for each presentation, but as we like to have questions too, I hope the presenters will aim for 15 minutes. Might be hard, but well, let's give it a try. And I put up a little sign, and that says then we have 50 minutes, and then try to round off. And I hope it will work for the virtual presenters too, but I think maybe you can, your it's easier for you to watch the clock. For the participants, all of you, please have your questions to the end of the presentations, and maybe there will not be room for all your questions, but then the presenters, at least the two in the room, will be around for the breaks and the dinner, and you can contact others. If more time left, we can have more questions and see if that will work across the full presentation. First presentation is from Kelly Schultz, and she's already a little bio on Kelly. She's a data visualization librarian at the University of Toronto. She previously worked as a data and a GIS librarian at the University of British Columbia, and prior to that, as a subject librarian for engineering and computer science at the University of Oxford. She had a Bachelor of Applied Science, Computer Engineering, and a Master of Information, both from the University of Toronto. Marcel Fortin is the head of the Map and Data Library at the University of Toronto, and he has also been the GIS and Map librarian at the University of Toronto since 1999. So now I'll give to the floor, or what we call it, the screen to you, Kelly, please.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. As was said, my name is Kelly Schultz. I'm the data visualization librarian at the Map and Data Library at the University of Toronto. And I worked with my colleagues, Marcel, Fortin, Kara Handren, on a project and partnership that the Map and Data Library has been developing with our university's High Performance Computing Center to provide a new library service around Web of Science raw XML data. Now, the University of Toronto, for those of you who don't know, is a large research-intensive university in Canada. Working with larger and larger data sets is really becoming the norm. And not just in demand by our researchers, but also our administrators who are trying to make sense of bibliometric data to better understand U of T's position in and impact in the global academic landscape. So one way they can do that is by analyzing bibliometric data from huge databases like the Web of Science. So the university in partnership with the library, acquired the Web of Science raw XML data, which is a data dump of the metadata from the Web of Science database. So it's in XML format, it's spread across hundreds of files, it contains millions of records, and uncompressed, it's about 1 terabyte of data, and we get annual collections and weekly updates. So you might be asking yourself, why does anyone need this other than maybe to own an archival data dump of a subscription database? Like, why can't we just use the regular Web of Science online interface to access the information we need? And the answer really is text and data mining. So for those of you who aren't familiar, text and data mining research methods involve working with large data sets, such as the metadata in Web of Science, and we're talking tens of thousands up to millions of records. And as you all know, you can't export 1 million papers from the Web of Science online interface. You're going to run up against much lower limits. And even if you try using the Web of Science APIs, there's also limits. So you're blocked from doing large-scale text and data mining on Web of Science metadata. Researchers may also want to programmatically develop queries and programmatically manipulate the results, which might even result in more queries. And again, this is not something you can do with the Web of Science online interface. Let me just give you a few examples where researchers and administrative staff have asked about using this Web of Science raw XML data. So we had a researcher who wanted to find all the information for articles from a selection of top economic journals over decades to look at the results through a gender studies lens, asking questions such as, is this field's publications dominated by a particular gender by analyzing authors' first names? Another researcher wanted to find all citation information on papers from top authors in the field of artificial intelligence from U of T, and then analyze what papers cite these papers, asking questions like, is U of T a world leader in AI research based on citation analysis? what researchers and what institutions are citing AI U of T researchers, what subfields are having the most impact. And not just researchers, we've also had an administrator who wanted information on published papers from faculty members from a particular U of T department for administrative purposes, but also to measure department research impact. As there could be hundreds of researchers in the department and then many thousands of papers, automating this process would save a lot of time, especially as programmatic methods would probably be needed to clean up the results and make sure that if you're searching by researcher name, that you're removing those false hits and that you're gathering all the publications for a particular researcher. Data to address the challenges of limits and programmatic manipulation. Well, the problem is that the library and researchers all recognize that working with this raw data is difficult. It's hard to understand and navigate the XML database structure. Intermediate programming skills are required. And without a high performance computing environment, it's very difficult and slow to work with such a large data set in terms of the number of files and the sheer size. So the data set has not been used to its full potential. So the Map and Data Library looked for ways to make working with this data set easier. Originally, we explored options with our library's IT department to host the data in ways that would make it easier to query. But the challenge is that the data is so large, it's growing weekly, and it requires powerful computing to deal with. It would be costly in terms of hardware and staff to implement such a solution, and it was really outside of the library's scope to provide high-performance computing environment for researchers. So in the end, we decided upon a solution to convert the raw XML to a more understandable format, a Postgres database that can be queried via SQL statements, and then host this database in a high-performance computing environment to facilitate querying the data and working with the large results. No more query limits, faster querying, flexibility to query and receive any field the researcher is looking for, and the ability to programmatically generate queries and work with the large results. So this solution really brings big data and the environment needed to work with it together into one package. So the question then might be, well, how did we do this? By partnering with SciNet. So SciNet is our high performance computing center at U of T, which provides Canadian researchers with resources and expertise necessary to perform their computationally intensive research. The Map and Data Library has been building a relationship with SciNet for a few years now. For my part, originally, I reached out to them to ask about their visualization wall, and they kindly gave Marcel and I a tour of their facilities, and we discussed opportunities for collaboration with the Map and Data Library around workshops and training. And we've also continued to build this relationship through RDM initiatives. But when this challenge arose and this need for high performance computing to work with this data set, they seemed to be the perfect group to reach out to in order to discuss a partnership. So we actually reached out to them at the end of August of last year. SciNet was very interested in partnering with us on this project. They were particularly interested in exploring the idea of hosting big data sets and putting processes and expertise in place to provide this service. Also, when we originally met with them, they had mentioned that their user base was mainly from the sciences, and they were hoping to reach out more to humanities and social science researchers, which one way they could do that is through providing access to this data. As there are so many mutual benefits to this arrangement, in the end, the real only costs to the project were myself, Marcel, Kara, and SciNet's staff time on the project, as they already had capacity to host the data. We worked closely with our contacts at SciNet on this project, providing the data, explaining our needs and our requirements, and they were able to convert the XML to a Postgres database. We worked with them to test the new database and prepare instructions and tutorials that are now on our website. As a special National Compute Canada account is required to access SciNet systems, we also discussed a workflow where we could sponsor accounts for students that would like access to the data but might be having some trouble getting an account. We are also currently working with SciNet on a workflow where we're going to take on the role of periodically updating the database as weekly updates come in. So now if a researcher wants to access the data, they can follow all the steps on our website. They would need to sign up for a Compute Canada account with permissions to access the database, process that normally takes a day or two for approvals. Then they can connect to SciNet's computing environment through SSH using a client like MOBA Xterm on Windows or Terminal on a Mac. And then they can query the database using SQL statements directly or by running scripts. The results can then be further analyzed and visualized using SciNet's computing environment, or the results can be downloaded to a local computer in a spreadsheet format. All of the steps for connecting to the computing environment and running your first query in SQL or Python are all outlined in our tutorials, and we are also in the process of preparing our scripts as well. There are also sample SQL queries that, as you can see on the slide, that users can copy, paste, and modify to help them get started. So the service is not restricted to only those with advanced programming skills, as I think that many of the map and data library users would be able to query this database by following the instructions. And in addition, if they do have any questions, they can contact us. And if the question is complex or highly specific to SciNet systems, we can also refer questions to staff members at SciNet to assist as well. So now we have a new service that provides a one-stop shop of easier, faster, and more flexible access to the Web of Science raw XML data. The partnership has also been an excellent opportunity to build a stronger relationship with SciNet and learn more about their services and how to take advantage of them, and for SciNet to learn more about the map and data library services. And this project provides opportunities for the map and data library and SciNet to cross-promote each other's services to our users. And now that multiple map and data library staff are more familiar with connecting and using SciNet system, we can also guide other users, especially those that might feel intimidated by the process. So we've started offering this solution in consultations as researchers approach us to looking to work with the Web of Science data and use text and data mining methods and tools. And we plan to offer a webinar of this solution to our users for promotion. We're going to demonstrate querying the database and providing some examples of how you could work with the results through data analysis and visualization. This is the first data set or database that SciNet has hosted, but this project is really only the beginning. We hope that this will serve as a test case and that other big data sets can be offered in SciNet's environment in partnership with the Map and Data Library. For example, we are currently in discussions about hosting patent data this way as well, as the US and Canadian patent offices offer bulk downloads of their XML data. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions now. Thank you.
Yes, any questions? A question for Kelly? Yes, super.
Hi, Kelly. Sorry if I missed this, but the bulk downloads, is that a normal feature of Web of Science, or did you have to ask permission, or how does that work? And maybe you address that already, but.
No, I didn't. I kind of glossed over it. It's an expensive product that you have to buy. It's not something that just comes with your Web of Science regular subscription. It's a separate product from Clarivate that you have to purchase and license.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, we have.
Thank you. Following up question, what is the exact content of this Web of Science raw XML database? I mean, is it only papers or only metadata about papers, or is it also data sets, research data sets, and other types of research information?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So what it is it's the citation information. So the metadata for like journal articles, some conference papers, there's some patents in there. but it's just the kind of author, year, journal title, that kind of information, plus abstracts. So not the full text, but there are abstracts in the data set. I hope that answers that question.
I'd like that too. Yes, thank you, Kelly, very much. Very interesting. And we got your slides in the app, or will be shared. We know that. Then we'll move on to the next presentation. Oh yeah, and will you stop sharing? I think there's something about that. Great. And then we will come to the next presentation. I'll just go back. And that I will find, and that's from John Johnson. And John is a data manager and metadata specialist working at Closer, leading the infrastructure strand of his work. His main focus is development of the Closer metadata search platform, being developed as part of the Closer collaboration between the UK birth cohorts and longitudinal studies. His research interests are currently using machine learning technologies to tackle the metadata deficit. He's the vice chair of the DDI Alliance Technical Committee and is responsible for documentation on current 3.x versions of DDI standard. And he also currently co-chaired the European DDI conferences as a position he has held for 6 years. So welcome on stage, John. And let me just find when your report. Oh. Yes. The thing is, I want to go to the desktop. I have it here. You can just see it. Go away. And are we sharing now with the Zoom? No. Yeah. No, no, don't close it. The second Zoom, yeah. Okay. That's okay. Share screen. Oh, yeah.
Then you want to share the big screen up top there.
Yeah.
No. Top left. Where it says screen.
That one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, otherwise, yeah, because you haven't had that. Now, if you present, you're presenting on this thing.
I'm pressing F5. Like this?
Yeah.
Will that help? Something is working. Yeah.
Thank you, Sophie. Yeah, so I'm John Johnson. I'm technical lead at Closer, and so I was.
You're good.
Lift off number 2. Right. Yeah, so I'm John Johnson. I'm the technical lead at Closer and have been for a while, but best part of 10 years. And the slide's also written with Hayley Mills, who's senior metadata manager also at Closer, and is a integral part of making all this happen, as I'll try to explain a bit later. So want to move along. Oh, I did that. I'll click. Okay. No, sorry. How do I do? Sorry, I'm just the mouse. Ah, fantastic. Yeah, so I'm going to cover 4 things really. One's a quick introduction to Closer, something around the technology, development of technology, something around the culture, all sort of aspects of the project, and some stuff around resourcing the project, and really want to sort of talk about some of the challenges we've faced, some of the identify some of the achievements in a way, and I think sort of it's really been sort of, I couldn't have written this 10 years ago. I've only just about written it now. It's sort of been quite a long learning process for it. So I was sort of trying to pull that sort of information together. Right. God. So dear me. Sorry. Trouble with this mouse pad. Thank you very much for that tip. Yeah, so Closer is a consortium of 19 studies now, UK Longitudinal Studies that span sort of social sciences and biomedical sciences. And the first ones sort of were a cohort that was born in 1930. So the data varies quite a lot from before even computers are really envisaged to people who are now collecting natively on mobile phones. So the studies themselves have got a vast range of experience in terms of time and in terms of data collection. One thing that I think is important to say is that, and this sort of reflected what Nicholas Blomberg said yesterday, is that we're curating this data, metadata, for these studies, but these are studies which collectively have hundreds of downloads a month. So it's worth the investment. If you're having 5 downloads a year, we're not going to be doing this sort of thing. So at the moment, we're curating data for research data that is used quite extensively in the UK and also internationally. So it's a project that is really about the sort of certainly not the long tail anyway. So we have sort of 5 main functions in Closer, and they sort of help us, which is our mission statement, to maximise the use value and impact of UK longitudinal studies. So the areas we cover: data discoverability, data harmonisation, data linkage, training, capacity building, which I'm also going to talk a little bit about. And although I'm not going to talk much about it today, a key part of what we do is around policy engagement in terms of pushing the evidence into policy, into Parliament, and so on. So this is sort of where we sort of started, really, which was the fact that metadata is lost through the research process, and stuff gets designed, and this is a problem that archives really struggle with. They have to retrofit information from studies, and what we wanted to start thinking about was shifting the narrative and thinking about technology and culture that starts to sort of make this a possibility, so that the information from survey design and data collection, data management, and so on is pushed through into the sort of analysis and publication sort of stages of research processes. So so that we're not wasting time, but also that there is a provenance to what people have, and that's something that researchers struggled with for many decades. So the main sort of technical product that we produce is Closer Discovery, which we haven't got the URL for, but on screen. But that is a metadata platform that captures the information in those studies, and it runs on Eclectica repository using DDI lifecycle, and this is the current state of where we're at in terms of the raw numbers of content at the high level items, and that's best part of 10 years work to get there. So on the technology front, just want to quickly whip through some of the sort of the highlights of our journey, really. One is sort of starting out. So in 2012 or 2011, when we started the project, and we sort of had all the bits, but we didn't quite know how we're going to pull them together, how we're going to sort of turn it into a real sort of information source for users. So we had these sort of elements. We had a prototype questionnaire editor, we had stuff in Excel. We knew what control vocabularies we want. We had quite an early version of the collector repository at the time. There are tools like Sledgehammer, which extract metadata out of statistical files in a sort of systematic way, and life cycle. So we had the sort of the bits and thinking, how can we actually pull all those things together into a sustainable project, and actually make this a long-term viable thing. So the sort of first thing we do is really thinking about, so we sort of were working with the studies, and we had a sort of very sort of, I suppose, naive sort of workflow with sort of this questionnaire editor, which was sort of on desktop version, and we had Excel spreadsheets, and we're sort of trying to manage all this stuff. And it very quickly became, with like 8 studies and multiple people in studies doing various bits of the workflow, that it just all became a bit sort of difficult to manage. So although we hadn't intended to write a lot of software in the project, we ended up having to develop quite a lot of software to sort of pull those things together to allow different users in different places to input things in a consistent manner, to have some QA. So we developed what is now Closer Archivist, which enables people to manage questionnaire metadata and also manage the metadata from the data, plus sort of provenancing, concepts, topics, control vocabularies in one place, where we can QA them before we try to put them into a long-term repository. So the workflow now, this is a simplified version of it, but it's still useful to think about the way in which we've sort of separated out functions to allow us to have sort of relatively simple workflows, but allow people to allow places where we can have good quality controls at each point to make sure that we have a sort of clean and consistent end product of granular metadata, which people can then use with some level of confidence. So the questionnaire capture, for instance, we've gotten that we were originally just typing stuff in by hand, but now we have sort of multiple sources of scraping things from CAPIs and spreadsheets that studies have. We have some manual process curve entry as well, but each stage we have some sort of level of QA before it goes into the final repository that then becomes publicly available. And I think the other thing, things that Nicholas said yesterday was about how curated data, in this case curated metadata, can create new possibilities that the sort of raw distributed and sort of curated data can't. And I think one of the things we're looking at the moment quite seriously is using machine learning technology on existing corpus that we have, and potentially as corpus grows, to start thinking about building services that allow other parts of the sort of research infrastructure, so questionnaire specification, mapping to ontologies, those sort of things, to evolve from the sort of content that we've created. And hopefully that will have an impact on the level of reuse of questions and sort of general level of making some of these things like tagging to ontologies sort of a doable thing, whereas at the moment they're so manual that it's just too resource intensive to be practical in any real sense of the word. So I think that's the sort of technology and content opens up other possibilities that I think is quite interesting area of thought. So I'll just quickly talk about some of the sort of cultural things that I think are important. I'll go quickly through. I'm probably okay. About some of the people that we work with and some of the sort of cultural things we had to sort of address. And the first thing was the people we really started interacting with initially were the data managers, because they had the content and they knew the data best, really. And there were a range of things we've done around data managers in the various studies to try to engage them and pull them in. Some of those things are just, as usual, more staff, more money, those sort of things, which is sort of self-evident. But providing software that really is negotiated with them in terms of its development, so it meets their needs, it meets our needs, training and webinars and those sort of things. Also things like technical committees where they have a technical input into the direction we're going, so it engages them in a way that so we're not this sort of centralized body that sucks things out of them, but there's a sort of negotiation and a sort of a two-way flow of things. And those things I think help internally within studies to convince PIs who the most PIs metrics are how many publications we're getting out of the study. They're not thinking about what is the quality of the data, the discoverability so much. Those are sort of leverages. So we use data managers to try to sort of help the principal investigators buy into the project. And speaking of them, we try to engage with them in different ways. Just the sort of raw, your studies is more visible, you're going to get more users, those sort of things. But other things which are just as important in many ways are a study network, which allows them to talk with other people in a quite a reasonably relaxed way, not a confrontational way. They're not in competition, they're sort of thinking about ways in which collectively they can have a better visibility of longitudinal studies per se, as opposed to their individual study. Sort of input into the governance of the way in which the project runs. And then some other sort of benefits, which is, trying to raise the visibility with funders to say, actually these studies all have this sort of resource issue, or we need some more investment in this particular area, to try to sort of, get a narrative going that an individual study would find quite hard to raise above the sort of parapet. And researchers, something like discovery, which is quite a complicated thing in many ways, because it's a complicated business, longitudinal studies. But providing a consistent interface, providing the ability to have provenance, which is quite often missing, to to generally lower the level of ad hoc inquiries they've got to do to find data and understand data. Things that have sort of helped them engage with discovery. And finally, funders, we sort of, as a sort of collective spokesperson, if you like, for some of the studies in some respects, advocating for common standards, sort of appealing to their best nature in terms of things like cross-funder rationalization. And, a funder always wants to see studies more being visible and more data being used from a study as well as some of the sort of collegial things around study networks and so on that I think funders sort of appreciate as an important part of developing a culture. And finally, just quickly talk about resourcing. So I think we've had an impact as a project on the studies themselves, in helping them to make the case internally to collect some of the metadata earlier in their own internal processes. New studies have appreciated the ability to be able to easily evaluate how well other studies have done in terms of whether questions have worked and things like that. I think the other thing is that increasingly the funders are saying to new studies, or funders that are studies that are trying to refund, that you've got to have high quality discovery. And I think that's starting to change the expectations of studies and funders, what they can now sort of say to studies that are putting in proposals. On the data management side, studies are more confident, I think, to put in for infrastructural things. There's always a competition in a way within an organization who, whether it goes to data collection or data management, or whether it goes to sort of research. And I think that data managers have a stronger hand, I think, as a consequence of the sort of visibility that things like discovery are able to do. Internally, some of the studies have started to improve their processes so that they're using the resources that we've created in collaboration with them to use back into their own data management processes to improve their own efficiency. And that's obviously a good thing. And I think the other thing is that funders are also much more aware of the need to have better skills and capacity in the sector, which I think was a little bit under the radar, say 5 or 10 years ago. And finally, in terms of coordination, there's been some, we're not responsible for things, but I think generally the sort of metadata landscape has got a lot better. And organisations like in Britain, the Office of National Statistics and NHS England are, actually getting behind metadata as an idea, which 10 years ago wasn't happening. And funders, I think, are more confident about taking forward bits of what we're doing, plus other things to create sort of more coordinating bodies at a higher level that are able to sort of long-term invest in longitudinal studies as a sort of thing, as opposed to just individual studies. And finally, things like the ESRC are actually now, following on from that, developing their own plan for the next 5 or 10 years around future data services, which I think Bruce might be talking about at some point this week, to support and plan long-term resourcing for infrastructures in economic and social research. And that's us. So contact us, come to our stall, and we'll find out a bit more about discovery if you're interested.
Yes, thank you, John. We can room for one question. So please step forward. No, we can conclude. Everything was clear and to the point. And John, you're here, so. Now I'll just find the presentation. Is that okay? Somehow it's not in presentation mode on the screen. Yes, next presenters is Sophia. Lafferty-Hess works at Duke University Libraries as a senior research data management consultant. Sophia has worked on the curation and archiving of research data for the past 10 years. In her current role, she's a product owner for the Duke Data Repository and is a creator within the Data Curation Network. Prior to joining Duke, Sophia worked as a research manager, research data manager, within the UNC Odom Institute for Research in Social Science, in the Social Science Data Archive. Yes, floor is yours. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here today to tell you a little bit of updates from the Data Curation Network and some of the work we've been doing to build and sustain a curation community. So to give a little bit of background on the Data Curation Network, we began in 2016 and we're generously funded by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. And right now we have 15 member institutions. We're primarily made up of US-based academic institutions that run our own institutional data repositories. We also have a number, 2 nonprofit data repositories, Dryad and the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So our main mission is to work together to advance open research by curating data to make it more reusable, understandable, and support ethical data sharing practices. And we do this via our community. So we have over 40 data curators that are addressing different data sharing challenges. So we really try to work hard to have a space to communicate openly about, curation tips, tools, practices, as well as pain points that we all might share. So some of the things that we're engaged in within the DCN, obviously curation. I'm going to say a little bit more about what our cross-institutional model for harnessing the skills across the network look like in a moment. We've also been engaged in a number of different education initiatives. We ran a number of open workshops to the archive and library community pre-COVID, and we're in the process of publishing those education materials as online modules. Another big thing that we have focused on developing over time are primers. So these are essentially quick start guides for approaching curation of either a particular data type or curation concept. So I think we have about 27 when I checked this morning primers on the DCN website. We also, these are mostly hosted via GitHub because we do see these as resources that are going to continue to evolve and grow over time. And then a big thing is the community. So we do have interest groups that individuals within the members institutions can contribute to. We hold an all hands meeting every year. And then we have lots of different events and trainings and opportunities for conversations and engagement throughout the year. So, and on top of our community, obviously one of the big things we do is curation, and we're really focused on helping repositories respond to this need for curation at scale. So many repositories these days, we're obviously getting in, especially in institutional repositories, a diversity of data types and data coming from lots of different disciplines. So essentially how the DCN works is we're kind of like a microservice layer. So between the data coming in and the data being published in a data repository. So for instance, if I'm at Duke, I'm a curator at Duke, and I get a data set in and I'm really unfamiliar with that data type, I could decide to send that into the network where it would be matched up with a curator with more appropriate expertise or experience with that data type or discipline. They would do their curatorial review, send feedback back to me as the local curator, and I would interface with our depositor. And then we'd work together to make any modifications. The data would then flow into the data repository where it would be published. So again, the DCN doesn't run any technical infrastructure for data publishing. It's really that human infrastructure for harnessing that expertise across the network. So we do train all of our curators using what we call the Curated Framework. We came up with a nice acronym for the steps that might be involved in the curation process. So it begins with obviously checking the files, becoming familiar with what's in that submission information package. Then, you want to actually understand the data files in connection with the documentation. There may be a step where you request missing information from the depositor. There may be some augmentations made to the submission, either the metadata or things around the documentation. We transform the file formats potentially, and then there's kind of that final evaluation step where you take a step back as a curator and see that final package, maybe connected to things like the FAIR guiding principles. And then obviously you should be documenting throughout. So I want to note, as somebody who's been doing curation for quite some time now, that we present this in kind of this linear fashion. And as many of you might know, you might jump between steps or revisit steps multiple times. So I think this is really valuable for building a shared understanding, particularly with new curators, so that we can have some consistent treatment of data across the network. So turning more now to the organizational aspects of the DCN and kind of our progression over time. So as I said, we started in 2016 with 6 original partner institutions. Sorry, my slides are not showing up exactly right, so it's hard for me to look at that in this. Okay. And in 2016, they were really engaged in a lot of research and planning. So they did some focus groups with researchers. They compared their original kind of curation workflows and what they were doing locally. They did some fiscal modeling. And then they came up with the model that I kind of demonstrated before for how to support cross-institutional staffing for curation. And this is published as an IJDC article if you're interested in looking into that. In 2018, we moved into our implementation phase grant, and that's when we had 8 partner institutions, and that's when Duke came on to the network. At that time, we hired a coordinator to help with kind of the movement of the data across the network. We trained our first curator cohort, which I was a part of, and we also put our technology workflows into place. So we do use Jira for tracking data sets across kind of that workflow piece. 2019, the DCN actually went live. So that's when data sets could start flowing between different institutions. 2020, we're in assessing and an adjusting phase. And I would also say a community building phase. So this was when special interest groups were doing lots of work. We were pushing forth on a research agenda, which I'll talk about in just a moment, doing a lot of thinking about sustainability planning. How do we move from a grant funded project to a sustainable organization? And then in 2021, July 2021, we transitioned to our membership model and really trying to be something that's sustainable into the future. So speaking of our membership model, I'm not going to go, okay. No, my slides aren't working. The space bar. Oh, I had to move these forward because I needed to see them. And then. It's like it switched off of. Maybe, hold on. Let's see if this one, okay, now I'm good. Okay. Sorry about that. I was in my flow. Sorry if this messes with me, but I don't want to look at this and then you guys at the same time, but it's messed up. Anyways, technology, fun stuff. Anyways, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but essentially the sustainer level is where you're going to get the curation support. The ambassador level is more of engaging in all of the community aspects. And then at the sustainer level, you also get representation on our governance board. So this is our governance model. Again, it's really based on allowing the member institution to fund our overall operating costs so that we can be sustainable into the future. Right now, we do have a fiscal home of the University of Minnesota, so we haven't become like a nonprofit organization as a standalone organization or association. So for our governance model at the top, you'll see we have our governance board. So each member institution has a representative that's on the governance board. We also have two people that are members at large. So this is often coming from our kind of curator pool, and that's elected positions. And then we have a chair and chair-elect that's on rotation to have kind of that continuity. We have an advisory board to help with the strategic direction. And then pretty common structure here. We have committees that kind of handle the essential work of the network, and then interest groups that are more informal, focusing on a specific topic or research project. So these are some of our current interest groups. We have one on big data, one on human participants, one on institutional outreach and communication, which I am the chair of. So if you're interested in this topic and kind of what we talk about and do, I'm happy to discuss that on a break. Racial justice, and then we have had two short-term, more kind of research-based interest groups, and I'll talk more about their outputs in a moment. So our interest groups also are focusing on putting out community resources that are openly available to all. So our human participants interest group, which is also headed up by my colleague Jen Dara, who many of you in IASSIST may be familiar with. She's my partner in crime at Duke. They've generated two primers, one on human essentials. So like when you get human participants data set into a repository, what might you be looking for, as well as one on looking at consent forms. Our racial justice interest group has helped generate our code of conduct, and going back to kind of our curated steps, we have some checklists that are openly available online, and they went through and added ethical considerations for each of those steps. So things you might want to consider when you're trying to check files or understand files. So moving on to some of the research and exploration we've been doing within the DCN. So I think one of the big questions that we've been thinking about is, well, what is the value of curation? I think all of us, we wouldn't be doing this work if we didn't think that there was value in it. But, I think as a community, we're all trying to figure out how do we measure this? And one of the ways we went about it is via doing two small surveys. So the sample in the first survey was the perspective of repositories actually doing curation. And I will say, We kept the scope to this to just US-based repositories, given the DCN is primarily working within the US, but we do see an opportunity here to potentially expand this to a more international audience in the future if there are partners that are interested in that here at IASSIST. And then also the perspective of depositors that are actually receiving curation. So this was a sample of people that had submitted data sets within 6 of our member institutions, Duke being one of those. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about our findings, but I will say that we did find that people thought that there was value in curation, which was nice to hear. One of the other questions that we asked that I thought was interesting is we not only asked the depositors, do you see value in curation, but do you feel more confident sharing your data due to data curation? And we did see 90% saying they agreed with that, which was really, really cool. We also got some really rich qualitative data that we have been working on coding for different themes. I'm just going to say anecdotally, we saw a lot about how curators help with enhancing documentation, enhancing metadata, making data more understandable, making data more reusable, making data more accessible. So I'd say our FAIR terms definitely popped quite a bit in some of these responses, which was, again, not too surprising, but nice to see. I will say we're in the process of writing up both of these findings for different journals. One has been submitted, one we're still drafting, but we like to live our values. So both of our data sets are openly published already on the University of Minnesota's data repository. So again, we'll be sharing these slides and encourage you to check out the data if you're interested. So one last note on research and exploration. Again, we are all about partnering. So we've been working with a couple different groups on 2 specific grant-funded projects over the past year or so. One is in collaboration with Ithaca SNR, which is focused on leveraging data communities to advance open science. Both of these are funded by NSF. The Ithaca SNR grant essentially was hosted an NSF workshop that brought together 14 data communities, and we matched those data communities up with an information professional to then have a conversation about, their current data sharing practices, potential pain points, what infrastructures they're using to hope to kind of further incubate those communities into the future. The other one is called The Realities of Academic Data Sharing, and that's in collaboration with the Association of Research Libraries. And it's kind of looking at 3 key questions. One being, well, where are researchers actually sharing their data and what's the quality of the metadata? What's actually impacting researchers' decisions for how and where they share? And then the final one is, well, what's the actual cost of data sharing to institutions? And I think this last question is very, very interesting to me, especially as we get prepared in institutions in the US and elsewhere to respond to the NIH policy that's coming down the pipeline. There's a lot of questions, and I imagine many of you who are positioned to talk to researchers about how to prepare for data sharing are getting questions around costing. And I know I, for one, don't feel very well prepared to answer those. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done here, and I'm going to be really interested to see some of these findings that come out of this project. So to conclude, we recently had a meeting where we came back together as a group in person. It was great in DC to kind of reflect upon the last 6 years and the development of the network and kind of this movement from a grant project to hopefully a sustainable organization moving forward. And, we thought a lot about our successes, our challenges, what structures we actually use to communicate and collaborate and build our community. And one of the things that we kind of came down on as an idea was this idea of us kind of being an example of radical interdependence in practice. And this is a quote that's coming from one of my colleagues, so I cannot claim credit for it, but I really liked it, and so I was just going to share it. And we feel that, radical interdependence is really just recognizing the interconnectedness of the work we are all doing. It's about collaboration, it's about trust, it's about vulnerability, and it's about accountability. So, it's really about that intrinsic desire to show up for one another based on clear expectations, commitment, and the shared goal of advancing the field. So again, this report's not out yet, and I asked our director, can I share this, even though we haven't actually published it yet? And she gave me the go ahead. but it should be out in a few months. And I really think the report, we're hoping it can be a conversation piece with others that are trying to develop communities of practice. I think it can be a challenge to have a community of practice that's really active and supportive. And I will just say from my own experience that I've really enjoyed being a part of the Data Curation Network. And I think that this idea of how we kind of lean on each other and then also build each other up has been one of the things that I've really appreciated. So I liked this idea and wanted to share it with you all. So now my slides aren't working again because I touched this, but that's fine. My last slide just said thank you. You can get lots more information on the Data Curation Network website, or feel free to contact me or find me during a break. I'd be happy to discuss more. So thank you.
Yes, questions for Sophia? Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll get.
Thank you. I think this is a fair, we would love to have something like this. I'm wondering though about the legal and technical issues that you face doing collaborative data curation. Presumably you can't just send data sets around to whoever you want. How does it work, especially data sets with sensitive data?
Well, okay, that's a very good question. And so I think the caveat here is that all of our repositories are open access repositories. So all the data that's already being submitted by the depositors, they are expecting it essentially to just be published. You know, so that's one of the ways that this makes this work, right? You're right. If we were dealing with any sensitive data or data that had restrictions in place, it would complicate this process hugely. So that's very good question. And I would say if we ever did kind of scope out some of our repositories for more restricted or sensitive data, we would have to do a lot more thinking about how to do that within a legal and ethical framework that takes into account the movement of that data between the network.
Thanks.
Thank you. It was a very inspiring talk, and I believe this model should be able to replicate elsewhere in the world. At least I hope so. My question is, you mentioned at the very beginning that Data Dryad was part of the DCN, but then I didn't understand what role they play. Are they an equal member doing curation? And the reason I'm wondering is because we have users from Stockholm University using Data Dryad, so maybe they already benefit from the services of the DCN then.
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. And as far as my understanding, it's really up to the data repositories for what data sets they send into the network. So I think that that would be up to Dryad on what data sets they're choosing to push through the network. But I can't say a whole lot more about, you know, Dryad's involvement. I did look at the stats this morning just to familiarize myself if anybody asked me about numbers, which is a common question sometimes. And I know that they've sent at least like 40 data sets through the network when I was looking at it. So, and they do, you know, their curators also will curate other repositories data sets. So yeah, they're an active member. I don't know if they like allow, you know, a depositor to kind of request for their data set to go through the DCN. I think it's much more based on the curator's kind of perspective on when they need that extra expertise. I hope that answers your question. Thanks.
Thank you. And again, yeah, like you said, you are here. So more question will come. Yes, now we are on for our last presenter, and that will be virtually.
Okay, I think if you share, you're probably okay to share straight away. We see, but we probably see your notes page. I don't know if are you using two screens? Now we're good.
Better now?
It looks really good.
Excellent.
And the
Okay,
same
thank
on
you
the
very much.
different screen we're going, so very good. Welcome in the room, Kati. Seems to work. We're looking forward for you to presenting your abstract here, and I'll just give you a little bit of bio on you, and then the floor is yours. So Kati is a sociologist and hold a doctoral degree in health science. After several years as a researcher, she has worked as postdoctoral fellow at the Research Center Qualiservice at the University of Bremen since 2018, where she's responsible for developing research data infrastructures for qualitative data, research and data management services. Within the scope of the Consortium for Social, Behavioral, Educational and Economic Data, part of the National Research Data Infrastructure in FDI in Germany, she's coordinating the development and implementation of the QualidataNet network, which she will present on behalf of the team. And that's why there's so many names. So you have it, Kati, we are looking forward.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and I'm really happy to follow this very interesting presentation on the Data Curation Network. That was really interesting, and I would have had the same question regarding the data protection issues that are related with that. Okay, then let me show a little bit more about QualidataNet Network, the project that we are working on currently, and their objectives related with it. QualidataNet Network is part of the National Research Data Infrastructure, as you already said, in Germany. Up to 30 discipline-specific consortia develop infrastructure services to help facilitating data sharing and access and reuse of research data. And QualidataNet is part of the consort SVD, as you already said, the Consortium for Social, Behavioral, Educational and Economic Data. It is expected to create a community-centered federated network for qualitative data, which provides a single point of access and consultation on sharing and reusing qualitative data. And as you can see at the bottom of this slide, by now there are 6 research data centers that currently work at a basic structure. All of these have experience with qualitative research data. That is Qualiservice, the research data center for qualitative data of the social sciences at the University of Bremen, the research data center for business and organizational data. This is the second one. The third one is the research data center for education, and this includes already a network for educational data. And the next one is the research data set for higher education, research and science studies, is this one, and the archive for spoken German. And all together we are working on this basic model, basic structure, which is supposed to become bigger and integrate more partners when we build it up. As I said, all of these research data centers already have experience in archiving and sharing qualitative data, and they really know the related challenges, which are on the one hand, that is due to the specific nature of qualitative research data. I'm talking about data such as biographical interviews or narratives that usually contain a lot of personal information, and qualitative research is usually concerned with living people or persons, and thus usually contain sensitive information as well as contextual density. Due to sensitivity, the processing of qualitative data requires to take legal regulations as well as ethical standards into account. Furthermore, it is necessary to understand the context of data and data generation, and this is even more important because most of these data sets I'm talking about are not open accessible. You usually have the description, the metadata description on the screen, and have to decide if it fits your research interest. And that is why the contextualization of this data is very important. And the importance due to the high degree of openness related with qualitative data and subjectivity of qualitative research this process contains. Apart from this, there are challenges related to archiving services. In Germany, the landscape of qualitative data providers is fragmented, and only a few research data centers offer professionalized services for qualitative research data. And these are often highly specialized on a specific data type or area of research. Furthermore, researchers are often not familiar with the archiving services. It's completely different to quantitative research, and experience difficulties in finding the most suitable data provider for their data, as well as in finding research data sets that fit their research interest. And that are the challenges we have to be aware of. And QualidataNet is supposed to offer solutions for these issues. We will provide a search portal enabling users to find core qualitative data sets of the network partners on a central platform to support researchers in finding data sets and data providers in improving their findability. Driven by the needs of qualitative researchers, we are developing a common core set of metadata elements for qualitative data description, allowing for data findability, accessibility, interoperability and reusability at the archive level. That means we aim at meeting the FAIR criteria. And during the development of this metadata core set, which is in the center of findability currently, we experience challenges such as that the different data providers use different data models and requirements to describe their data sets. This contains differences in the degree of granularity. For example, some start the description of the data set with the study level, and some start with some focus on the level of data sets or data collection level, which has to be harmonized in the core set. And to ensure fair metadata, we take international metadata standards, such as the Standard of the Data Document Initiatives, DDI, into account, as well as more general metadata schemas, such as DataCite. However, these schemas are developed for quantitative data and need to be adapted to the needs of qualitative data research. And this includes, for example, a controlled vocabulary for data collection methods or sampling strategies in qualitative research. Some achievements with regard to the integration of qualitative research started some years ago, since the DDI working group on qualitative data has started its work. QualidataNet considers these DDI products and developments. For example, the DDI Research Description Framework, Discovery Vocabulary, and the DDI controlled vocabularies that we revise and adapt to German first qualitative data requirements. Also, DARA, the most common registration agency for social science data in Germany, uses a subset of DDI elements and controlled terms, which we will include into the core set. This will help us harvesting the metadata because many data providers already provide these terms when they register data sets in the social sciences in DARA, and network partners do not have to provide additional information when they take part in QualidataNet. As well, the qualitative data model for DDI, which was developed by the DDI working group, guides our work, and I have a small and quick impression of that. The DDI data model is an abstract representation of different categories of metadata elements. These result in a metadata schema. The figure shows a technical representation of this model for qualitative research data, and here you find more information on that. And I have to say, I'm not an expert here from our group. Noemi, Betancort-Cabrera, can you tell a lot more about the DDI metadata model? Apart from improving findability of qualitative research, QualidataNet will support research in sharing their research data. It is expected to help researchers identifying the data provider that fits their specific needs. the provider with the most substantive methodological and technical expertise for a given data type is supposed to curate the data and is responsible for their digital long-term preservation. In addition, network partners cooperate in guiding researchers, harmonize their workflows, and provide best practices to prepare qualitative data for reuse. And our objective in our project is managing qualitative data, or work on this harmonization in this part, in this area. Harmonization and guidance is also the central idea with regard to data management in QualidataNet. In close cooperation with researchers, we develop a common research data management portfolio, which ensures high data quality and maximizes the potential for data reuse. The portfolio will support researchers to effectively and sustainably handle data throughout the research process, starting with project planning and data collection. And the long-term goal is that researchers use instruments developed for data curation already during the research process, and that subsequent curation at the RDC can begin without delay. The portfolio will be supported by research-focused user trainings that link up users with participating RDCs. And that's already what I wanted to tell you about our project and objectives. And I'm happy to answer your questions. And if you want to find further information, you can have a look at the website and contact myself or one of my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Kati, and thank you for holding your time straight. Questions for Kati? No, not right now. Then I want to share that in my early career, I wanted to make an archive or create or something for qualitative data in Denmark, and I didn't succeed at all. But so it's nice to hear. A question, how about GDPR issues? How do you handle that? All data restricted, or will you have some qualitative data that can actually be shared open access? Or how do you go about these issues?
With regard to this, network partners, by now these 5, there are no data sets that are open accessible, that are open data. That means you can get that after registration and usually also after signing a contract with the research data center. And the data sets will also stay at the research data center that curated it. The only thing that we can that we make easier or can facilitate on the network level is to find the data sets, so that we present all of the qualitative data sets we have in our network. We have in our network at one page, and support researchers to find suitable data sets, because it's still a big issue for researchers to become aware of the possibilities or options you have, and also to get to know which data sets are there that they can use for secondary use. So the Gdpr issues lay with the research data center, and we usually apply informed consent or anonymization practices, or I don't know what is in English, technical and organizational protection measures that we, such as on-site usage or things like that.
Okay, thank you. I think there are no more questions. Are there any questions we'd like to ask, cutting across the 4 presentations?
Okay, then I will stop sharing.
Yeah, you can stop. Yeah, we can see you a little bit. So that's nice. Yeah, I think that's. We'll say that's it. And all thanks to all our presenters. Shall we give them an extra hand? I think. Lots of food for thoughts, and now we can have an early coffee. So thanks for this.